Right now, welcoming back to the Schilling Show, regular guest Joel Gardner is the president of the Jefferson Council. Today's topic, we need better transparency at UVA. Thank you so much, Joel, for joining us once again.
Thanks, Rob. It's always a pleasure.
So there's a piece that's up at your website, and we'll give people that address in just a bit, but it has to do with transparency at UVA. This institution really seems to have failed in many ways, has it not?
It really has. For the past at least 5 to 10 years, particularly under the administration of Jim Ryan, there's been an incredible lack of transparency. And it's during a period when there's been numerous unprecedented scandals at the university regarding the shooting of our 3 students, regarding the healthcare system scandal, and regarding now very much whether there was some recent governmental interference in the governance of UVA. And our article, which we put out 2 weeks ago, really focuses on 2 extremely important issues that UVA has failed to address, and which really goes to the public's right to know. We are a public university that is supported in some degree by the taxpayers' money. But for any university which holds itself out to the world as being a beacon of following the truth wherever it may lead, it is so important for the university community and the larger community, worldwide community, to know the truth of material matters at UVA. And I'd just like to, hit on those 2 issues. So first involves the legal report that was commissioned by the Board of Visitors after the 128 physicians wrote their letter claiming quite a few actions that have been taken by the administration of the medical system, the healthcare system. And they listed many, and a lot of that had to do with hiring wrong people, with financial issues, with medical care as a whole. And it was, I think, important enough for the board to go out and hire a renowned law firm, Williams Connolly, to do an investigation. Well, they did the investigation, and they did a report to the board. That everybody agrees on. There was a report to the board. And that shortly after that report to the board, numerous members of the hierarchy of the healthcare system left, and in essence were forced to leave. With Craig Kent, with the dean of the medical school, Kibbe, certain surgeons. I mean, it was quite a few were forced to leave. So obviously the content of that report was of great importance. Mm-hmm. And over time, people asked if there was a written report and whether that written report was going to be made public. Well, UVA took made different responses to the requests over time. Initially, they said there was a report, but that one didn't exist now. Twice, once to the Daily Progress, once to NBC 29. Mm-hmm. They said there wasn't a written report. And when the Jefferson Council, when we made a Freedom of Information Act request trying to get the written report, what we got was something saying there was no written report, but there was an electronic report where there was an electronic...
Like a file.
File.
Yeah.
But no written report. And we found out from people who were there, present, that there was no doubt that when the report was given orally by Williams and Connolly, a written report was handed out to the members of the board so they could follow what appears, at least based on what we've heard, to have been a deck and a report made, a visual report, and they were given a written report to follow that. But those were collected at the end, and no one knows what's happened to them. But there was clearly a written report did exist, and there's been a total and complete rejection of any attempts to make that report public. Now, in addition to, in response to our FOIA, to their saying there was no written report, there was an electronic file, they also said, and to that extent, they claimed various privileges to not turning over whatever is in that electronic file. And here, as the old bard would say, is the rub. This is a public university. The Board of Visitors and at the Board of Visitors' request, the university spent millions of dollars. I don't know the exact figure, but with multiple millions of dollars to William and Connolly to do an investigation to find out what had actually occurred at the healthcare system to have caused 128 physicians to write that letter. And what we know is that at the time, the administration totally stonewalled any attempts to actually come to the truth. I mean, the initial reaction by Jim Ryan was to malign the 128 physicians. Of course, he later, a couple months later, apologized for it. And we learned that what the initial reaction was when Robert Hardy had his texts FOIA'd and wound up with the Washington Post, who made them public. Someone who wants to read all 950 pages of the texts of the Board of Visitors, which I have, you'll see that Robert Hardy, when made aware of the accusations contained in 128 physicians, wasn't to say, let's find out what the truth is here. His first reaction in speaking to another member of the board in one of the texts was, well, I've spoken to Jim, obviously Jim Ryan. What we need to do is to get a PR firm, and we need to come up with some type of plan on how to react to this, which is amazing.
We got to go to the break here, but I'm thinking about all this and just to myself out loud saying, how on earth could anybody believe that there was millions of dollars spent on a report that was never delivered tangibly, that we just had an oral presentation? That stinks from the beginning to the end and is totally unbelievable. So let's go to the break. We got much more to talk about with Joel Gardner of the Jefferson Council. The Schilling Show continues in a moment. Final segment of the Schilling Show for today, continuing with Joel Gardner, the president of the Jefferson Council on Better Transparency at UVA. We got about 6 or 7 minutes left, and I want to make sure we get to the other story as well, the mystery of the missing meeting. What's happening there, Joel?
Well, what has happened is this involves the new selection of the new of our rector at UVA. And as we know, people have been paying attention. A number of elements of the university community have alleged that they are and condemned what they saw as governmental interference in the governance of UVA. They claim the federal government did that. They claim that the Youngkin administration, both of them interfered with the Board of Visitors in making decisions, particularly involving DEI and Jim Ryan's resignation. Constant allegations of governmental interference. And what we have learned from numerous what we believe are very credible sources, is that there was some major governmental interference in the selection of our new rector. And what I can tell you, the story was that, and we've heard this from many people, that originally the board, even after the hostile takeover by the Spamberger and her allies of forcing Republicans on the board off, not allowing those 5 Republican appointees that were selected by Governor Youngkin to even get on the board. So, and then having 5 more forced to resign, having 10 open seats when she took over, when Governor Spamberger took over. Totally unprecedented, hostile takeover in the board. That board had apparently behind the scenes, because they had to appoint a new rector, since one of those forced to resign was our prior rector. And apparently they had picked Victoria Hawker amongst themselves that she was going to be appointed. Well, apparently that did not sit well with a number of leaders of the General Assembly. And to our understanding, coming from multiple sources, that some of the leaders of the General Assembly and somebody within the executive branch made calls to the 10 newly appointed Democrat members of the Board of Visitors and said, if you did not change your vote, you were going to have trouble.
Wow.
In essence, understanding that they would not be approved by the General Assembly unless they changed their vote to Carlos Brown, who was, in fact, elected by the board. Now, apparently, and again, we've heard from various sources, this is well known within circles in Richmond that this happened, to those circles who were in the inn and were paying attention, that happened. And if, in fact, it did happen, which we believe it did happen, then this is by far the greatest interference in the selection of the leadership of the Board of Visitors by outside parties in the history of the university. Now, the question, who is going to ask these people? Because no one's going to admit to it off of it. I mean, and, none of the Board of Visitors who were called or contacted are going to own up to this unless perhaps if confronted and asked directly, did you ever have any communications with any members of the General Assembly or the governor's office in connection with the selection of the rector? Is anybody ever going to ask him that direct question? Because to our knowledge, that is exactly what happened.
Joel, these are very troubling times at UVA, and these incidents should not be allowed to stand. So what is there to do? We've got about 2 minutes left. What is there to do about this? I know you're trying very hard to get the information, but if they just clam up and don't take it, do you take them to court?
Well, I don't think we can take them to court. What I do think is that the media, and I'm talking about newspapers, I'm talking about TV, I'm talking about radio, should go and ask those questions to every Democrat, all 10 of those members who were appointed by Spamberger, and ask that question that I asked. They should be confronted, which I don't, there's one person we know pretty well for sure, but we think there were multiple people. And unless they are asked, and unless they either say no comment, which tells you something, or they outright lie and we're not going to know about that. No, but the pressure has to be brought. The public should be asking those questions. The same people in the faculty senate or the student council or other members of the university community who are claiming governmental interference by the federal government or Governor Youngkin should be asking these questions of the General Assembly and the current governor's office and those members of the board. They should be asking directly whether any discussions ever happened. But they're not. I mean, at the end of our article, again, it's 2 weeks ago, we said, are people going to do this? And to our knowledge, nobody has done it yet. And yet, I heard again from another party, this is well known in Richmond that this occurred. And again, we heard it from multiple sources and people who were in the know that this occurred.
Joel, I'm glad you're staying on top of it. It's got to be incredibly frustrating to know that the truth is out there and they're just hiding and circling the wagons and making it difficult. We're almost out of time, but if people want to get more information or actually support your efforts at the Jefferson Council, tell us how.
Yes, you should go to our website, which is jeffersoncouncil.org. We're having our annual dinner in about 3 weeks, where we'll be having students speaking. We'll be having a panel on the Freedom of Information Act. I'll be giving a talk on the current, what was going on at university and what is going on now. And then, of course, we have our guest speaker, which I would imagine most people would love hearing, which is Chris Rufo.
Yes.
So I would very, very much, it's on April 14th, I would very much recommend to people who are really interested in what's going on at UVA and with Chris Rufo, what's going on a broader scale in higher education, to attend our meeting.
I hope they will, and Chris has been a guest on this program before. He's a very smart guy and has great insights. Joel Gardner, thank you so much for joining us today on The Schilling Show.
Thanks a lot, Rob. It's great speaking to you.
Yeah.